6:00, and I'd like to declare the opening of the annual Electors meeting. For this one is actually the 221, but we're doing it in August 2021. This is the meeting for 220. So hello everyone, including all those who are watching us live. I want to welcome you all to the annual Electors meeting for 2020. I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. I'm the Deputy Mayor, Stephanie Stroud, and I will be presiding this meeting. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Wadja Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area and recognise the continuing cultural connection of the Wadja Noongar people with the land and the waterways of Subiaco. Now, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the contents of the 2019-20 annual report and also the accompanying financial statements. But it's also about general business, and your opportunity will come to present your questions and your statements and your motions. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So by being present, you are consenting to the possibility of your image and voice being live streamed. Please ensure that your mobile is switched off, and also ensure that please you have registered at the sign-in desk. This also helps with the meeting, with the minutes of the attendance list. Now, first, to go through a little bit of procedure, I have to go through the attendance and apologies and leave of absence. So I wish to acknowledge the attendance of the councillors to this meeting. Is David McMullen here? And I just wondered if you'd mind either putting up your hand or standing up so our electors know who you are. So, David McMullen, Councillor Rick Powell, Councillor Lynn Jennings, Councillor Rosemary De Vries, Councillor Angela Hammersley, Councillor Matt Davis, and Councillor Jodie Mansfield. Thank you. Have I missed anyone that's not on my list? Oh, okay. We haven't received any apologies, but we do have Mayor Taylor and Councillor Blake Phelan, who are on an approved leave of absence. So the annual Electors meeting is your opportunity to raise questions and motions on the 2020 annual report and any issues that concern the City of Subiaco. We would like to hear from as many people as possible, so we plan to adhere to the following procedure. All electors who submitted by 5 p.m. yesterday will be the first to speak. Speakers who have more than one presentation will be given the opportunity to further present after everyone has had a turn. And once you finish speaking, please return to your seat. I have a little speech for you from the Deputy Mayor. 2019-20 presents the City of Subiaco in a very positive light, despite the challenges of COVID. In fact, it is the way both administration and council professionally stepped up to meet those challenges that deserves recognition. We mastered online meetings, and together we worked up a $4 million relief package, as well as an average saving of over 6% on your rates. To help fast-track the local economy, Council also approved over $2.5 million of capital works projects. COVID was not the only challenge. The city's town planning scheme, 5, was approved in February. And throughout the year, the city continued to liaise with Development WA over the planning of Subi East, including the community access to our iconic Subiaco Oval. The city proceeded to lead with a range of initiatives in sustainability. Our library was refurbished to meet the needs of a contemporary community hub. October 19 welcomed 5 new councillors, bringing with them valued talent and passion. To conclude, and to quote from Mayor Taylor's annual report message, she says, "I'm very proud of what city staff, elected members and the community have achieved this past year together." I'll now refer to our acting CEO, Cliff Ruing, who will present the report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, everyone in the audience. The City acknowledges the late annual report for the 1920 financial year and the late receipt of the audit report. This is unusual, as a full financial year has passed from the period that the documents relate to. As you may know, this was due to retrospective changes made to the financial management regulations, a change in our auditors, and as a consequence, a different approach to the treatment of certain assets was the main reason for the delay. But in any event, the audit report for the 1920 financial year was only received by the City on the 13th of July 2021, and it was an unqualified report. Having said that, it is anticipated that the annual report and audit report for the last financial year ended 30th of June 2021 will be back on track, and the annual meeting of electors for last financial year hopefully will be held later this year before December. The local government is one of, if not the most diverse industry that exists, and our services impact everyone one way or another. As soon as we step outside of our properties, we start to use local government assets, often without thinking about it. It is well known that most local government provide an A to Z of services, and the City of Subiaco provides most of these. A lot of what local government does goes almost unnoticed and is taken for granted as a given. Examples of this include issuing, whether it's licences or library books, street sweeping, tree maintenance, mowing parks, refuse collection and disposal, amongst many, many other services. Generally, we only get to hear about these services and assets when something is not quite right. But I would like to think that when this does occur, the City is responsive to restoring the situation back to normal as quickly as possible. During the 1920 financial year, impacted by COVID, as the presiding person has just indicated, the City achieved much during the year. Highlights include the refurbishment of the library and commencement of the relocation of the depot and new operations centre at Bishop Street in Jolimont. The COVID relief package that the Deputy Mayor referred to included free parking in all parking stations up to the 30th of June, no parking compliance on length of time cars remained parked, environmental health fees were reduced by 50% and other charges were not increased, and importantly, no interest charges and fees on rates instalments were made, and nor was any interest charged on overdue rates. My appreciation goes to the directors and their teams for achieving as much as they have done during what was clearly a very difficult year. In my view, the finances as expressed in the financial statements are in good shape, and my appreciation goes to Director Hawkins and his team in managing the finances well over that year. The 2019-20 annual report and financial statements were adopted by Council at its meeting on the 20th of July last year. The annual report and financial statements, including the Mayor's report, the Acting CEO's report and the Auditor's report, are submitted for consideration of this meeting. And I would call for the annual report, including the financial statements and audit report, to be received. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. I now would like to call for a mover and a seconder for the financial statements and annual report, as well as the audited report to be received. Thank you, Hugh Richardson, and thank you, Pam Meehan. I'd now like to call a vote. Thank you. This is where you can raise your hands if you're an elector of the city. So can I please have a show of hands in support of the... And we don't count you, we just go by a majority vote. I hope there's a majority. Thank you. Yes, you're satisfied? Thank you. Thank you. We've just moved our first motion. Okay. I now call on anyone who has any statements or questions that relate to any business to bring these forward. We will first go through the questions and statements that have been received and then take any other questions. If any questions cannot be answered, they'll be taken on notice. So to set off the evening, the first topic is actually 440 and 424 to 436 Hay Street. And I call upon Jackie Greenshields to the lectern. Thank you.
Jackie Greenshields, 97 Salisbury Street, Subiaco. Dear Presiding Member, I'd like to ask the councillors for their support to protect the former West's Theatre at 440 Hay Street, circa 1911, and the 7 identical single-storey shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street, circa 1921, from demolition or part thereof. The State Heritage Council in 2021 noted in their assessments that all of the 8 buildings have local heritage significance through their contribution to the cities of Subiaco's Rockaby Road and Hay Street heritage area and have rarity value. I have put a little statement up there from a recent article out of the Australian, which I think everyone can read, but more recently, beg your pardon? And I can read that from there. I had another one as well, which I was hoping to read. Yeah. Do the owners of the beautiful old buildings threaded through our daily lives in both the domestic and public spheres have any idea of the magical hold these structures sometimes hold over us, we who are utter strangers, mere passers-by in the rush of life? These places are often fretted with the meaning that is richer and deeper than the scope of the building's purpose. They are viewed as precious and singular and cherished by a collective, by the many strangers who pause before the wonder of these grand old buildings and take note and silently tip their hats to the past. In summary, could a motion be put to this meeting tonight to ensure that there is no demolition or part thereof of any of the shops, the 7 identical shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street, or the Old West Theatre at 440 Hay Street? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The City has prepared a draft local development plan for Sedan Street's precinct, which includes the buildings at 424, 428 and 440 Hay Street. The draft LDP holistically considers the future development of the precinct and includes provisions relating to built form, the movement network and public benefits. A notice of motion is not considered necessary at this time because Council will consider this draft plan at its meeting in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Jackie, are you happy with that response, or did you want to? You did seem to want to pursue a motion. What do you want to think about it? Yes. Okay. Can I come back on that? Sure. Come now.
On saving all these buildings at 440 Hay and 424 to 436 Hay Street from partial or full demolition. But respectfully, I'm sort of not satisfied with the answer, given that at the next OCM Council meeting, we'll be considering the demolition of one of those 7 shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street to make way for a new roadway as part of the local development plan. I therefore do wish to raise a motion from the floor that the electors present at the AEM tonight do not support the full or partial demolition of the buildings at 440 Hay Street or any of the shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street. Thank you.
You wouldn't mind just staying at the lectern while staff actually gets your motion up? We then need to move it and second it. Because of live recording, we really have to synchronise the turning on and off. Would you like to read the words of your motion, and are you satisfied with those words? Just slow down, sorry, slow down so that we can record it. Okay. Okay, can I please have a seconder to this item? Thank you. That's Mark Tonti. Thank you. I don't think you need to speak to the item. You're satisfied, Ms. Greenshields? Do you want to speak?
And one of the 3 top state heritage or architects for WA recommended that all of the shops and the theatre be retained, and I can read that article if appropriate. Thank you. Read it? Okay, I think I just put it down. So this was the article in the West on Wednesday, so very, very recent, headed War of Heritage Words. I won't read the whole article, but 3 of the state's top architects have slammed claims about some comments that were made by another architect who the City of Subiaco knows quite well. But at the end of this article, Mr. Taylor, who's one of the top 3 heritage architects, called for the Hay Street shops to be saved in a report to the Subiaco Council in May. He said the shops at 424 to 436 Hay Street were in sound condition and 440 was in good condition. He said they all had moderate degree of integrity and authenticity, claiming their primary significance was their aesthetic presentation, their contribution to the surrounding heritage area, and a high social value to Subiaco. So again, one of the top 3 architects in Perth. Thank you.
Okay, we now put that motion to the vote. Those who support the motion, would you please raise your hands? You happy with that? That's carried, thank you. We move on to the second item, which is very near and dear to a number of the St Ives residents, and that is 616 Hay Street and the Bunnings DA. The first person to... no, I've spoken to that person. That first person is not speaking. So we move on to Michael DeLeo. Michael, would you like to come up to the lectern? Thank you.
My name is Michael DeLeo. I'm a resident of the St Ives Retirement Village, which is located immediately adjacent to the proposed Bunnings development at 616 Hay Street, Jolimont. I note that the Subiaco's RAR recommends that the council gives the go-ahead to the proposed massive Bunnings warehouse immediately adjacent to our retirement village. It seems, and I stress that, it seems that the planning staff have ignored the serious safety concerns, including toxic fire, clearly outlined in the many submissions opposing the development. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think that the planning staff's conclusion is disgraceful. How a Bunnings warehouse and a retirement village can be considered as compatible neighbours is extremely difficult to comprehend. I cannot believe that any reasonable person in this room could believe otherwise. My question, therefore, is this. Given the home-based land is owned by the City of Subiaco, why is it not possible to negotiate a leasing agreement or sale so as to enable Bunnings to remain at Salvado Road, a location which has long been established as an appropriate commercial area for high activity businesses such as a Bunnings warehouse? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLeo. You may sit down and the CEO will answer your question.
Thank you for the question. The Bunnings decision to seek to move from 55 Salvado Road is a commercial decision for Bunnings, and land ownership decisions is not something the city has control over. As set out in the city's local town planning strategy, which was adopted by Council in February 2019, the home-based site is within a targeted growth area and identified as a key development site to accommodate increased population and housing. Traffic and hazardous material considerations relating to the proposed Bunnings development have been addressed in the Responsible Authority report, which is scheduled to be presented to Council at the August Ordinary Council meeting.
Thank you. And Mr. Leo, you'll have another opportunity to speak to that item when we're making a decision on it. Thank you. Steve Saunders from St Ives, thank you.
Councillor Stroud, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Saunders. My wife and I live on Bishop Street, which is just going to be a few metres from the entry and exit to this Bunnings giant warehouse. Now, this is going to destroy our way of life. There is going to be at least 1,000 cars a day coming up Bishop Street or coming out, turning into Bishop Street. So I believe the City of Subiaco have a duty of care, more so a duty of care to seniors. And when I read here that one of the services I've underlined is respect from the council. This is what you do, you respect. You have a duty of care. So the question is, the councillors, would any of the councillors, and I'd like to see a show of hands, like to see their parents or grandparents put in the situation that this Bunnings warehouse is going to have on 300 seniors? No? So one assumes...
No, sorry, it's just not appropriate to ask that. Okay.
It's not.
No, just proceed with the statement. If you like,
Fine.
just turn off the light.
All right, well...
Sorry, excuse me, Mr Saunders. You're not in the position to ask the councillors that question at your electors meeting. You will have another opportunity to speak to the item when we're actually making a decision, and you'll also be able to listen to the debate. And maybe during that debate you will get some answers to some of those questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for the question. Safety, noise and environmental considerations relating to the proposed Bunnings development have been addressed in the Responsible Authority report, which is scheduled to be presented to the Council at its meeting on the 24th of August 2021. And property values are also not a valid planning consideration. In response to question 2, 616 Hay Street, Subiaco is zoned mixed use and bulky goods showroom, and it is a discretionary land use in this zone. The Responsible Authority report provides a complete assessment of the proposal within the applicable planning framework.
Thank you. The next topic on the agenda is Subi East, and I ask Paul Clements, one of our past serving councillors. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a question. When the interests of the community are so poorly represented in delegations that lost a major reserve and active public open space, what will be done to correct and repair such shortcomings in Subiaco?
Thank you. We do not agree that the community is poorly represented. The City will always continue to act in the best interests of the community and consistently with following council resolutions.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is also very near and dear to the Speaker and to many residents of Subiaco, and it's the Hayden Button fig trees and the city's tree canopy. Would Linda Rogers like to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member and staff and everyone who's here tonight. Good to see so many people all at once. All right, question 1. Could you please provide an update on the status of the 3 fig trees on Hayden Button Drive? I'm concerned as Development WA has not committed to keeping these 3 interdependent fig trees together, despite the fact that Hayden Button Drive was curved to accommodate them in August 1939. I appreciate that the Council has put them on the significant tree list and protected their roots. However, the Federation trees on Colgan Road have been decimated and 3 Gallipoli trees have died while under Development WA care. I'm worried that Development WA regards the trees as Lego pieces to experiment on, rather than as valued assets to the City. Thank you. Do you want me to ask the next question? Question 2. I'm concerned about the loss of our urban tree canopy cover. Since the urban tree forest document was produced, developers have stripped many trees off private land and in some cases on the verge. All of our canopy has been depleted. Will there be an update so we can understand where we are now? I know Nedlands is investigating protecting trees on private land. What can be done to protect our tree canopy? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. The City has worked closely with Development WA to protect the 3 Hills Weeping Figs on Hayden Bunton Drive. These trees are significant and important assets to the City's urban forest and are a significant part of the City's character and heritage. These trees, along with many others on lot 12732 Subiaco Oval and 304 Roberts Road Subiaco, are now protected under a preservation order. In response to question 2, the City undertakes mapping on a regular basis that updates the City on the status of its tree canopy. At this stage, the tree's canopy is stable. We are aware that private development is having an impact on the overall canopy, but the City works hard with developers to ensure that significant trees aren't removed and that new opportunities for tree planting are considered during the planning stages.
Thank you. The next topic that has been very topical in the City of late involves King Edward Memorial Hospital parking. Helen Leader, would you like to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Helen Leader, Cuthbert Street, Shenton Park. First, a big thank you to the present administration and all elected members. And thank you and farewell to Acting CEO Fruing. Somehow businesses appeared to continue as usual while you've all been under the spotlight of the inquiry. And another thank you to all who enabled this meeting to proceed, particularly to Councillor Hammersley, who was at the crucial meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Being here tonight, it's like a breath of fresh air, and such a relief to know that none of you feel the need of security or rangers to protect you. Or us, I was never quite sure which. My question. I note that while the Mayor has been on approved leave since Monday, there are continued comments on her Facebook page that relate to her elected members' motion concerning the non-existent parking spaces around King Edward. Since it is clear that not everyone understands, would the City explain to the meeting just why it is that these spaces simply don't exist?
Thank you for the question. A report including detailed reference to parking around the hospital is contained on the August Council agenda, which is publicly available, the contents of which will be considered by Council at its August meeting. But a very brief summary of the reasons why the parking spaces do not exist in the immediate vicinity of the hospital is that the demand for spaces in that area, as most of you would know and appreciate, is that they are always in high demand by staff, visitors, patients to the hospital, and similarly to serve the surrounding businesses to the hospital. In addition, there are a number of parking permits that are issued to residents in the area, and obviously the City must have regard for our residents as well as to visitors to the City. But in short, there are plenty of parking bays to service the hospital, but not necessarily within the immediate area that most people want to park. So there are options contained in the report to provide additional parking, but they will be on the other side of the railway line.
Thank you. We have another interesting topic this evening, and it's all about due regard in planning determination. Pam Meehan, would you like to come to the lectern? Thank you.
My name is Pam Meehan. I live at Cuthbert Street, Shenton Park. And I'll take this opportunity to thank the Deputy Mayor and Councillors for this opportunity to speak at the Annual General Meeting. Would the City please explain if the concept of due regard is of any use in protecting residential landowners from overwhelming development? Recently, a development was approved on Evans, Railway and Onslow Road by the DAP, which did not respect the new town planning policy. Are there any strategies the City can use to protect the residential population? It was disconcerting to hear the City's newly accepted town planning scheme being denigrated by the developer. Thank you. And I was absolutely appalled at the response of the DAP people, including one of the councillors on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Due regard requires decision makers to give proper, genuine and realistic consideration on relevant matters when making a planning decision. State planning legislation provides overarching discretion, and the City's local town planning framework, while not strictly complied with, resulted in a development being approved which was generally compatible with the policy settings. In the absence of the new town planning policy, it is not known what level of development may have transpired, similar to other examples in the Perth metropolitan area where significant discretion is exercised.
Thank you. The next topic on the agenda is about city productivity. We have a question from past serving councillor Hugh Richardson. Would you like to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Hugh Richardson from the South Ward, Hilda Street, Shenton Park. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Acting CEO and staff, and more importantly, all those lovely electors. Good to see you here tonight. Miss Leader stole my thunder in wishing to express our thanks to you, Deputy Mayor, for stepping in and for our meetings to have progressed so smoothly in the absence of the Mayor on several occasions, and we thank you very much for that. Acting CEO, you've stepped into a very difficult position and you've done extraordinarily well under the circumstances, and thank you as well. If I may provide a little bit of background to my questions, they are to do with productivity within Subiaco, and productivity means that our rates are going to go the furthest. We are going to make the best bang for our buck with our rates. And the core services that are provided by the city are rubbish, roads, drains and parks, which have all seen increasing automation, using machines instead of labour to increase their productivity. Yet the total employee numbers are unchanged since about 2017. Local government is an industry, as Acting CEO indicated, yet that change in local government, our particular local government, there appears to have been virtually no productivity improvement in that time, as measured by the number of employees, which, as I indicated, has not changed. We can't say that we've got more roads. That hasn't changed. The rubbish routes haven't changed. Pardon me, higher density blocks of flats have contract rubbish services with little impact upon the city service. Employee numbers as a representative measure of productivity can be compared with other local government areas and perhaps should be. My question therefore is, given the rest of the nation's economy, local government being a part of it, is required to provide productivity dividends to justify its existence, what measures does the city have? What was the productivity improvement last year? And most importantly, what is the policy for next year? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Productivity as such is not measured in local government as success is measured in other ways, such as meeting objectives contained in strategic plans, targets and actions in the corporate business plan, compliance in meeting legislative requirements and achieving a satisfactory audit report. The city has a good record in achieving all of these outcomes. Now, having said that, obviously one area where councils are very much involved in is that we're always benchmarking with other local governments on a whole range of factors. And this is also achieved through comparing our performance with other councils once a year. The one thing that you probably do appreciate, having been an elected member in the past, is the significantly increased compliance regime through new regulation and legislation. That does not change. The rate of change is increasing all the time. And so I suspect that's part of the reason why there has been an increase in the number of staff members is simply complying with new legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next issue on the agenda this evening is Local Planning Scheme 5. Thank you, Peter MacDonald. Would you like to come to the lectern?
Thank you, Presiding Member. A number of homes were upcoded to higher density against owner wishes in LPS 5. These were the forgotten homes, those left behind or deemed expendable by the Minister. In the cases where these homes have been upcoded, our understanding is they will generally not be able to access the protections under Subiaco Local Planning Policy 1.2 that are provided for homes on low density lots in density transition zones. Is a scheme amendment to seek downcoding the only remedy available to these homes to protect their amenity from high density development applications on neighbouring lots that have a higher coding? And if not, what are the other viable remedies?
Thank you. In answer to the question, the city's local planning strategy and local planning scheme number 5 contemporary planning documents having recently been finalised in February 2020. The preparation of a scheme amendment to downcode lots is not considered appropriate in the city's planning context and is unlikely to be supported by the state government. The submission of such a scheme amendment may reintroduce blanket densities to wider areas.
Thank you. The next topic on the agenda is all about high-rise. And it's a question for Sukan Jean, and it is being read by Peter MacDonald. Thank you.
Thank you. This question from Sook of 4 Rankin Road in Shenton Park. Her statement is as follows. I have serious concerns regarding the high density accommodation and high-rise buildings that have been approved or may be seeking approval in the future in Subiaco. While Western Australia has been lucky so far, we can see that COVID-19 in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria is causing difficult times, with lockdowns, social distancing being implemented. Some authorities in the eastern states have had to resort to fines for breaching rules enacted to minimise the spread of the Delta strain. The fear is that the current pandemic may end up with COVID-19 becoming endemic. Should this eventuate, high-density living should be avoided. Hence, long-term planning would be prudent. Thank you. That's the end of the statement.
Thank you for the question. There is no known correlation between apartment living and the enforcement of state of emergency laws in various jurisdictions. Apartment living in appropriate areas provides substantial benefits to communities and helps in addressing significant urban sprawl and biodiversity destruction.
Thank you. The next topic on the agenda is about responsible authority reports. That's known as RARs. And Graham Taylor would like to come to the lectern. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, councillors, for being here, and electors. Before I start, I had 3 questions on the financial statements, but there was no discussion. Am I able to raise those now?
Would you mind just proceeding with the 2 questions that you have, and then we'll come back to you for the others, because we just want to make sure everybody has their turn. Thank you.
When errors or omissions are pointed out in the RAR reports, which go to JDAP, why doesn't the CEO insist they are looked at independently by the compliance officer and another executive experienced in financial planning? Shall I go on to the second? Yep. When will the CEO insist that planning services takes into account our code entitlements of residential adjoining properties in all cases for DAs? It is no good having planning services saying noted in an RAR report or planning report when our code entitlements should have been adhered to. That's the 2 questions.
Okay, thank you. In response to question 1, the City is not aware of any errors or omissions in responsible authority reports. Question 2, planning proposals are assessed on their individual merit in consideration of matters such as the applicable framework, technical specifications and community consultation.
Okay, I appreciate you do have 2 more questions on behalf of Alicia Taylor. Would you like to present those questions? Thank you.
Graham Taylor again, 57 Forest Street, Subiaco, 100-year-old property with proposed high-rise to be built next to it, 7 stories, boundary to boundary. That's explaining who I am. First question. We have seen in the eastern states examples of pre-existing buildings such as Mascot Towers experiencing structural damage, allegedly as a consequence of high-rise development in the vicinity due to compaction, excavation and heavy machinery. When will the City of Subiaco require DA applicants to provide a bond of at least 50% of the total development cost where a high-rise of 5 stories or more is going to be built boundary to boundary? When I say boundary to boundary, it's not just boundary to boundary. There's excavation for car bays, double stackers, and if a block grades, they're going to excavate all along the block. So in my case, with a 100-year-old property, how's that going to survive boundary to boundary building? So back to my question. When high-rise of 5 stories or more is being built boundary to boundary on small blocks, and I might add that my block is 504 square metres and the 7-storey was proposed on 504 square metres as well, adjacent to single-storey building in the case of 57 Forest Street. So what I'm really saying is that we've got all this case, anybody's watched cracking up on 4 corners. There's a huge number of projects in the eastern states. problem is that builders put in the DA, council approves it, and either councillors don't have, or council doesn't have the expertise in their engineers to pick on the flaws in the building construction, whether it be the engineers, the developers using, whether it's the builder, and where shortcuts take place. The builder might take shortcuts, possibly the engineering design is flawed. So we have, for anybody that's watched Cracking Up on Four Corners, if you haven't watched it, watch it, it's totally depressing. So what's happened on the East Coast is that councils have been quite deficient. They have allowed these projects to be built. They've been a shambles. In some cases, people can't even occupy their premises. They've been condemned. And yet councils are not being held to account. Now, I think there's a simple solution. If a builder has to put up 50% of the development's costing $6 million, they put up a bond of $3 million. If they put up the bond of $3 million, A, they're going to build it to specifications so there won't be any damage. B, if there is damage, there's a fund available for those monies to be made available. So City of Subiaco has to take a lead here. It's no good saying we don't have to do it because no one else does. We have to see what's happening elsewhere and be proactive. Governance is very important. Yes, thanks. Yeah. This one's a little bit briefer. If council issues building licences or DAs which could cause damage to adjoining properties, when will City of Subiaco accept joint responsibility with the builder for defects resulting from the approval from building plans and engineering reports? If these two steps were taken, this would go a long way to reducing the shortcuts taken which not only result in structural problems to DA buildings but also to adjoining properties. So what I'm really saying here is that council's viewpoint is that it's a civil claim. If I have damage to my property, I have to take it up with the developer. The developer could be a $2 company, they go broke, so where do I go? So the problem is that council approves the plans. Do they have the engineering expertise to approve those drawings? But because they do approve them, and if there are these defects, everybody else pays the price, it's the neighbours. Now, I don't know that the City of Subiaco have got the expertise in their engineering staff to appraise complex plans like 7 storeys on 504 square metres. So I feel that council has to take joint responsibility for the losses and defects of what they approve. They can't say that we approve it and it's your problem, you take civil action. So that's my question too. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I might respond initially by referring to the poor governance that you referred to. I've worked for many major local governments in Perth and in the country, and I can assure you and the audience that the governance processes at the City of Subiaco are as good as any that I've seen in Western Australia. So I hope that puts your mind at rest. In response to question 1, building construction is governed by the Building Act 2011 and relevant Australian standards, and bonds to the value of 50% of the development value cannot be levied under Western Australian legislation, even though we may wish to. In response to question 2, business defects are the responsibility of the individual builder and are a commercial matter between private parties. But you're certainly right, the city would not have building expertise on staff in order to assess complex buildings like Subiaco 1, and that is done by other parties. In this case, in Subiaco 1, for example, multiplex had their own assessment done on the complexity of the building construction.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to statements now, and we have a statement on the annual report presented tonight. Can I ask the past serving councillor Julie Matheson to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Oops, excuse me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on tonight. My name's Julie Matheson of 139 Coghlan Road, Subiaco. This annual electors meeting is to present and accept the 2020 annual report, but the report was delayed because of changes, as we heard tonight, to the Local Government Financial Management Regulations 1996 and an investigation by the Auditor General. This delay created an awkward situation for our elected council because they approved the budget, the 2021-2022 budget, without approving the 2020 annual financial statements. And I just wanted tonight to address some of the anomalies that I saw in the 2021 budget of $72 million. The drainage improvement program, which is listed, includes $72,000 for Subiaco Road, which we know floods the residents' driveways. Yet this road comes under the state government's Development WA, and Subiaco Council has no say in the development of Subiaco Road. So as a matter of urgency, why doesn't the council ask the state government to fund the drainage issue, not the ratepayers or the businesses that have been offered sandbags instead of drainage on Hay Street, Rockaby Road and Churchill Avenue? The other issue I'd like to just point out is there's also funding of more than $500,000 on local road improvements to Hood Street and Subiaco Road. Now, these roads are another example of areas under the control of Development WA, not LPS 5. It's astounding that in a climate change environment that roads are being ripped up and replaced when there's a high possibility that Subiaco Road will be torn up by truck movements when the state government sells off the land it owns. So again, why not ask the state government to fund the Hood Street and Subiaco Road road improvements and turn Hay Street and Roberts Road into a two-way traffic so that we can connect Subiaco East with West Perth to welcome new residents and visitors to Subiaco. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. You are correct that the adoption of financial statements at tonight's meeting relating to a prior financial year of 2 years ago is certainly unusual. However, it is normal for a budget to be adopted before the adoption of the prior year's financial statements. That occurs as a normal event by all councils every year. Having said that, we are not aware of any anomalies contained in the 2021-22 budget. The Subiaco Road drainage and resurfacing projects in the current budget covers locations east of Coghlan Road, which are beyond the extent of the planned Development WA civil works. Hood and Station Streets are under the management of the city, and streetscape upgrades, including installing a pedestrian priority crossing, have long been requested by the community. The city continues to lobby both levels of government for funding towards the Hay Street and Roberts Road two-way project, and I'm sure that will be fully supported by the council when the demand has got to a point where it is obvious to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to that, Ms Matheson, the Hood and Station Streets were all normalised in 2020. They're no longer part of Development WA. Okay, moving on to back to 616 Hay Street and the Bunnings DA. Can I ask Jane Levitt from St Ives Centro to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jane Levitt. I'm a resident at the St Ives Centro Retirement Village, where I have lived for the past 17 years. I'm very supportive of the previous representatives from St Ives Village with their concerns of the Bunnings development on 616 Hay Street. Added to that, I would like to bring to the table my concerns of the traffic volume given to the new developments of the northern end of Bishop Street, Salvado Road and Upham Streets, along with McDonald's on the southern end, which is a 24-hour business, and the proposal of a Bunnings warehouse on Hay Street. This is a residential area and certainly not suitable for a huge Bunnings warehouse, which will bring a massive volume of traffic. Has anyone given consideration to the road systems which were not built for the massive increase of traffic? I purchased my unit on Bishop Street for a quiet lifestyle in my retirement. Should this development go ahead, it will most certainly destroy this quiet lifestyle. Bunnings should stay where it is on Salvo Road, where it is appropriately situated with home base and the associated businesses, not adjoining a retirement village. Thank you.
Thank you for the statement. 616 Hay Street was sold via public auction in mid-2017. It was open to anyone to purchase the property. The planning controls over the site permit a Bunnings-type development and have done so for some time. St Ives is located adjacent to the Jollymont District Activity Centre, which has historically had a mix of light industrial, commercial and residential land uses. 616 Hay Street is zoned mixed use and bulky goods showroom is a discretionary land use in this zone. Traffic and noise considerations relating to the proposed development are addressed in the Responsible Authority report, which is due to be considered by Council at its August meeting later this month. The Bunnings decision to seek to move from 55 Salvado Road is a commercial decision for Bunnings and not something that the city has control over.
Kay Donkin. This is also about 616 Hay Bunnings, DA. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kay Donkin and I've lived at St Ives Centro for 18 plus years. We have an amazing close-knit community, and when my husband and I signed our contract in 2002, never envisaged the possibility of such an enormous commercial business such as Bunnings becoming our next door neighbour and invading our privacy. My first and foremost concern as a resident of St Ives Centro is in regard to the proposed Bunnings warehouse at 616 Hay Street is the safety of our residents with the increase of traffic in a residential area that is already pushing the limits. It's not only the traffic, but the fire risk element, and no doubt the ramifications with the values of our apartments. I implore the City of Subiaco to seriously revisit and work with Bunnings to be able to remain where they are now located in Subiaco. Thank you.
Thank you again. Traffic and hazardous material considerations relating to the proposed Bunnings development have been addressed in the Responsible Authority report, which is to be presented to Council at its meeting on the 24th of August. Property values are not a valid planning consideration.
I've just asked if our senior planning staff can elaborate on the safety issue of toxic chemicals and so on for you. So just give me a moment.
Thank you. And through you, presiding member, there's separate legislation which deals with the storage of significant materials and dangerous materials. So there's the Dangerous Goods and Safety Act of 2004 and the regulations which actually go and speak to that act as well. And they sit separately outside the planning process. However, through the Responsible Authority report, we've included an advice note to remind the applicants and the landowners of their obligations under the separate legislation which exists to ensure that safety is first and foremost, and any risks are minimised to adjoining properties and residential premises.
Okay, thank you. The next item involves meeting with the Premier and the Chair of Development WA. I invite past serving Mayor Tony Costa to the lectern. Thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, to your fellow councillors, and dare I take the opportunity, before I go into my statement, and to acknowledge the contribution paid by our acting CEO and wish him well in his future endeavours. Having said that, I'd like to read out, as a long-time Subiaco resident, ratepayer, elected councillor for the Central Ward, as it was known as in those days and still is, 1983 to 1994. And of course, I was elected the People's Mayor from 1994 to 2005. I am eager to learn if the Subiaco Council delegates have had their meeting with the Premier and the retiring former Central Ward councillor, Mr George McCullough, from Development WA, and what was the outcome. Meetings with the WA government have so far resulted in zero compensation and a watered-down memorandum of understanding which was signed off 10 days after it was approved in secret by the council's voting bloc. Most of the feedback to the Department of WA consistently showed the people wanted the 1.73 hectare of playing fields at Subiaco Oval, which is now trampled on by, dare I call it, the Bob Hawke College. A proper consultation process has not existed for this government project, and offering landscaping around buildings is not my idea of protecting a heritage listed reserve from private development. This council must do everything in its power to stop the carve-up of the heritage listed reserve at Subiaco Municipal Oval, and that includes advertising in the local Subiaco Post newspaper the parliamentary petition to preserve the reserve as Class A for the health and recreation of the people forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for the question, and also for your wishes for my future. Tony was actually on the council when I was employed as the city treasurer here in the 80s, and Tony hasn't changed much. So, perhaps in answer to the question though, in accordance with the council decision made on the 20th of July, the city has sent letters to the Premier of Western Australia and also the Chair at Development of WA, who was also on the council when I was employed by the council in the 80s. But the city has not yet received a response from either gentleman. So we will be following those letters up and trying to get a response from them as quickly as possible.
What I was asking the CEO is that I assumed we had received an acknowledgement of our letters, and apparently we haven't at this stage. So, as the CEO said, we're all... Yeah, okay. So we will follow that up. Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion to now bring to your attention. It's by Helen Leader, and it involves publishing amendments and alternatives. Helen, would you like to come to the lectern? Thank you.
Thank you. My motion is very simple, that amendments and alternative motions with staff comments are again published on the City's website by 5 p.m. the day prior to council meetings. My reasons, this would allow people at home and in the gallery to follow the debate. And all questions and statements will have been submitted by 5 p.m, so this publication would not in any way contribute to opinions from the gallery. So that's my first motion.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll deal with that motion, and I will now ask for a seconder. I assume you're happy to move your motion? Okay, thank you. So can I please have a seconder to the motion? Thank you, Pam Meehan. Thank you. Now, the acting CEO has a response. I will then open it up for any discussion, and then we'll put it to the vote. Okay. No, you can stay up there at this stage. It's your motion. So, thank you, CEO.
Thank you. I understand that a motion in similar terms to the one that you are proposing has previously been considered and not supported by the council. Amendments and alternatives do not form part of the meeting unless moved at the appropriate time when considering a recommendation contained within the agenda. Amendments may also be moved from the floor at the meeting of council and would not be captured prior. The Local Government Act 1995 and associated regulations do not require a local government to publish proposed amendments and reasons for the amendment prior to holding a meeting, as the amendment does not form part of the agenda for that meeting until such time as the amendment is moved at the meeting.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the floor who would like to speak to this motion? Okay, would you mind coming to the lectern? Thank you.
I'm Pam Meehan, Cuthbert Street, Shenton Park. Just a clarification on what you've just said. As I understand it, the alternate motions, what you're saying is under the regulations, alternate motions can only be placed at the meeting, even though they may have been distributed in the agenda, because this other alternate motions have been in the past advertised or made clear or something, but so that if you did know there was one coming, it was in the agenda, or you knew it was coming, there had been notice. But now there's no notice, so when the debate is actually happening, there's reference to an alternate motion, but there's no statement of the motion in black and white, so that's what you can't follow. You don't know what the alternate motion is. Does that make sense?
Find out when I try to answer it. No, look, the city does have a very good process where councillors are encouraged to advise the staff prior to the meeting of any major amendments or any alternative amendments. That enables the staff to research the implications of the proposed amendment or alteration and provide the elected members with information related to the proposed change. So there are on occasions times when we are working right up until 5 o'clock in any event on providing that information, but we endeavour to provide a response to elected members as quickly as we can.
Thank you. If you'd like to state your name, thank you.
Former councillor Julie Matheson of Ruby Hutchison House in Subiaco. As a former councillor, I support this motion by Helen and Pam, and the reasons being is because some councillors put a lot of time and effort preparing their alternates. They may not see the light of day, and then there is the officer's comment, which needs to also see the light of day. So I think in respect to the councillor or the mayor or the deputy mayor that put up an alternate, but it never got to that point, I think that work needs to be acknowledged in the council agenda and the minutes. Not the minutes, but just on the online, as Helen has suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Matheson. And just before you go away, you talked to the alternate motions, but I assume you also amend to the amendment, to the amended motions as well, amendments as well. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Would anybody else like to speak to this item? Okay, thank you. Would you like to, have you finished speaking? Thank you. Okay, then I will put this motion to the floor to vote. Thank you. Would you raise your hands if you support this motion? I don't believe we have a majority there. Thank you. Do you think it was lost? You happy it was lost? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry your motion was lost. Would you like to present your second motion? Thank you.
It's a very brief one. And just that the council acknowledge and commend the good work done by the Post newspaper and consider resuming weekly meetings with its reporters.
Order in the gallery. I assume you'd like to move that motion, Helen? Okay, can I please have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to come to the lectern and speak to the item? The seconder is Julie Matheson.
Thank you for the opportunity to second, and thank you for the motion, Helen. Yes, yes, the Post has done a good job in reporting the matters of council, certainly in my own personal experience in regards to my SAT appeal. The Post gave due consideration to the offence that happened, and I, yes, do commend this motion to the floor, and hopefully we get some more meetings with the Post. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, in my view, the motion is neither appropriate or necessary for this meeting to consider. By simply raising this matter with the Post newspaper present, you have indicated that, in your opinion, the Post newspaper has done a good job. And may I also say that we have a very good relationship with the reporter from the Post newspaper, and he certainly has a very good relationship with our communication staff. Has good access and is always onto the phone for them. Neither this meeting nor the council should consider this opinion expressed as a motion for council to consider. Similarly, in relation to the suggestion that weekly meetings with the Post should resume, this is not something either this meeting or the council should consider. Within the next couple of months, this council is going to have a new CEO, and in fact, within a week, next week, you'll have a new CEO, and within a couple of months, you'll have a new mayor. And this relationship with the media is obviously very important, and it is really up to those two people to decide how and what relationship they should have with the media. I don't think it's for this meeting to determine how that should occur, and in any event, it would not bind them to follow the motion from this meeting. But I'm sure it will be on the top of their agenda when they meet together in October.
Thank you. Would anybody from the floor like to speak further to this motion? I think you might have already spoken, Miss. Okay, question. Would you please come to the lectern?
Thank you. Julie Matheson, Ruby Hutchison House. Under the Local Government Act, the mayor and councillors, if that's what the communication agreement says, under the Act, the role of the councillor or the mayor is to communicate with its electors, and speaking to the media is one of the ways that it can communicate with electors. So, and we, certainly in my time while I was on council, that was banned and prohibited. So what do you plan to do to help councillors and the mayor be able to communicate with electors as per section 2.10 of the Act?
Okay, well the Act actually says that it is the responsibility of the mayor to speak on behalf of the council. It doesn't refer to speaking with the media, but it is obviously a very important responsibility of the mayor and the administration to work with the media to ensure the right message gets out and that questions from the media are appropriately responded to. As I mentioned, you will have a new CEO next week, and I'm sure that topic will be discussed as quickly as possible because it is an important consideration. And you will have a new mayor in October. And I'm pretty clear that both of those people will determine what the most appropriate practice is to communicate with the media.
Do we have any more who would like to speak to this item? If not, I'll put it to the vote. Can you please show by hands whether you support this motion?
I might get David to do a bit of hand counting. This one looks a bit closer, David. So if you support the motion, if you could leave your hands up.
26.
Thank you. Could I now ask those who did not put their hands up to put their hands up? That makes it easier.
Should have thought that.
I don't think that was quite right, but we'll take the motion as carried.
I can just see what's going to be on the front page of the Post on Friday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We've actually come to the end of these submitted motions. Would anybody like to now come to the lectern with a question, a statement or a motion? Thank you, Pam Meehan. Oh, sorry, first, just before you get up, Pam, would you mind just showing by hands how many people would like to come to the lectern? Okay, five. Okay. We'll see how we go because we don't want to be here all night, but thank you, Pam.
Pam Meehan, Cuthbert Street, Shenton Park. Could the City confirm whether or not the Mayor has informed the City and her councillors which official functions, if any, she will be presiding at during the term of her leave of absence? Thank you.
I'll take it. Thank you. The Mayor has received an approved leave of absence for council meetings up until the 27th of September. That does not mean the Mayor is not able to attend other functions outside of council meetings, and she may well do that, but at this stage we haven't been informed of which of those meetings she may wish to attend.
Okay, thank you. Sharon Williams, you want to speak, but I'm sorry, Sharon, you are not an elector of the city. Do you have anybody who can speak on your behalf? No, actually, Graham Taylor, Alicia's father, spoke on her behalf. So while you're sorting that, who else wanted to? Thank you. Would you like to approach the lectern with your name? Thank you.
I'm Tanya Shillington from Dance Classique WA Proprietary Limited on 36 Jersey Street, Jolimont. I'd like to ask the Deputy Mayor and Acting CEO and elected members about the process of the Council moving their annex of the technical services to 19 Bishop Street. I'd like to ask if the parking on Bishop Street and Jersey Street could be added to the August meeting when they're looking at the parking issues at King Edward Memorial Hospital. I have just heard tonight of the 616 Bunnings warehouse development on Bishop and Hay, which will have an enormous parking impact for Bishop Street. I'd like to ask about the DAP and where are their reports to the general public? Do the town planning schemes go to public consultation or comment? The public car park on Jersey Street, opposite my own business, Dance Classique, has many of the staff from the Technical Services building at 19 Bishop Street parking in the public community car park, which was primarily there, I'm sure, to service the expensive leases on Jersey Street. I would like to ask if the first hour of the car park was free and then increase the parking to more than $4 a day to restrict people parking there all day. I'd like to put in a request for a children's light crossing at 36 Jersey Street for the public safety. I'd like to close with a statement that says I'm fully supportive of the residents of St Ives residents and the many small businesses on Jersey and Bishop Street. We are all keen to hear about the Responsible Authority Report and the Bulky Goods Discretionary Commercial Traffic Hazard Report. Will this be available before the 24th of August? Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind, actually, would the copy of the statement help you now? Do you have the copy in your hand, just to help? No.
I just wrote it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's okay. It will just. You think you're on top of it? Okay, okay. Thank you kindly. It's just that you had a lot of. You raised a number of issues there, and we want to do our best to answer for you. Thank you. That's okay. That's fine. We're going to do our best. So. If you just give us a minute.
All right, I'll give this one a go. Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So I will just firstly state that the Responsible Authority report is publicly available on the city's website. So it's part of the agenda for August, for the August meeting. In there, the car parking for the proposed Bunnings has been assessed, and it shows that there's approximately 230 bays being provided by Bunnings in itself. So it's in 2 basement levels within the Bunnings development. So as you drive in from Bishop Street or Hay Street, it's got two levels of circulation. That includes car parking bays, Acrod bays, trailer bays, and so forth. The Bunnings proposal was subject to public consultation on a couple of occasions. So originally, many months ago, when it was first submitted with the city, and then subsequent to that, it was also sent out to people who made a submission and made available publicly on the city's website. We sent about 4 or 5 update letters to people who provided submissions. So both. So the process is then council will make its recommendation to the Joint Development Assessment Panel, the DAP. The DAP are the decision makers, constituting of 3 members appointed by the state government and 2 elected members appointed by council. Generally, once the RAR is provided, the agenda for the DAP meeting is made public 7 days, or at a minimum 7 days before the DAP meeting. So you would be able to download the RAR again and the DAP meeting agenda, and then you'd be able to contact the DAP administration if you'd like to put in a submission or ask a question or attend to that meeting as well. I think the remaining issue for planning would be the town planning scheme consultation, but it is a requirement under legislation that both applications and schemes and so forth are subject to consultation. I believe there was a question about a children's crossing, and if I'm not mistaken, that's subject to main roads approval through a crossing committee, and approval from the WA police as well. They base it on traffic counts and numbers, so that could be something that the city may consider, and we'll take that one on board. We regularly discuss these sorts of things. I think that's about the scope of and I apologise if I didn't grab everything in that.
Parking and the fact that they seem to be using up public car parking. Do we know anything about that? Yep. Move across now to the Director of Corporate Services. Sorry, a little bit tired tonight. Scott Hawkins, thank you.
Through you, presiding member. I think the question was around consideration of the parking implications with the relocation of the depot site from Upham Street to Bishop Street, because it was at 2 Upham Street. The parking implications were part of the considerations. The 2 Upham Street site, I think, had been used as a depot site for about 55 years. And was at the end of its useful life or practical life, and is also a site that's been classified in terms of possible contamination requiring investigation. So council considered the relocation of the site, and in doing that, one of the key things was around vehicle movement and parking. And a key objective was to move the heavy fleet vehicles out to, I think, and please forgive me if I get it wrong, John 23rd. So we've moved them out to there, and we only have the lighter fleet vehicles that come in for Parks and Gardens crews and light fleet vehicles at that site.
Okay, one more.
Can I ask how many staff are actually at the Bishop Street car park? Because the car bays at Bishop Street, I think, are 12 to include the administrative staff, but I'm not sure about all the light vehicles that are moving in the laneway of Bishop Street between Bishop and Jersey. Where do all those staff park their vehicles?
Look, I think it's clear that we don't know the answer to that at this stage, so we'll have to take that on notice. One of the benefits of putting in questions in writing before the meeting, it does enable us to obviously research the issue so we can provide a comprehensive response. So we'll take that question on notice. It will be considered by the council as the minutes of this meeting is at a later meeting, but in any event we will write to you and just let you know what the response is.
Could I ask that the parking of Bishop and Jersey Street is fully an agenda item at the 24th meeting, council meeting, because it's in less than 7 days and that agenda would be being written today?
Unfortunately, it won't be able to be considered at the August Council meeting. The agenda has been finalised, it's printed, it's published, but we will have a look at the issue and get back to you as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Who else would like to? Thank you, Paul Clements. Would you, past serving councillor, would you like to come to the lectern?
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to compliment former Mayor Tony Costa's view on the Subiaco East, which of course is in support of opposing the government program, which is to put high-rise residential development on a reserve, which has never happened before in Subiaco. And I would just say we have a petition going to the state government, which is in this room, if anyone wants to see me or Sharon later, or outside the Subiaco markets on Saturday morning. The questions that I'm going to ask is, why is the shared oval agreement at Subiaco East being considered as a confidential item rather than a public item at the next council meeting? The second question I'll ask now, presume. Can the city confirm whether the mayor has informed the city or her councillors that she will not be re-standing for re-election? Thank you.
We'll start with the second question first. We're only aware of what the general public is aware and what we've read in newspaper articles and perhaps on Facebook posts in relation to the Mayor's plans, but we will only know for certain on nomination day, which is coming up pretty soon, when the period for nominations close. And the date is, do you know?
9th of August.
No.
Sorry, 9th of September.
September. It's early September in any event. So perhaps back to the first question about the confidentiality of the shared user agreement.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, the nature of the shared user agreement for Subiaco Oval will be subject to legal advice received and obtained, and deals with commercial interests of other parties. So in light of that, and in accordance with the Local Government Act, it's best that it's dealt with confidentially by the council. What I would say is that much of the information that council has in principally agreed with the usage and costs remains the same, if not has improved for the usage for the city slightly. So we will endeavour to put as much information as we can in the background section of the report, which can be released immediately after the meeting, and have in principle agreement from the Department of Education and Football Commission that the agreement should be made public as soon as it is signed and executed by all the parties. So that is where we're at the moment.
I'm sorry, if you want to ask the question.
Just a clarification, just why it was public.
Well, it's not, you're presently not being recorded. Are you prepared to repeat the question? And okay, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, for the recording, the question is about the previous report to council regarding the shared user agreement timings and costs that was considered in July 2020, and why that report was made public and not confidential. That report, and the answer simply is that report was working towards two really key factors in the shared user agreement, and didn't actually consider or have as an attachment the provisions of the shared user agreement as this council report will have. So it was just talking about two key matters in assisting staff advocate for council's position for the shared user agreement, and didn't actually include all the terms, provisions, and the agreement itself. So that's the differences in dealing with it differently.
Thank you. Do I have any more people who would like? Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
3 questions on the financial statements.
Right. We may have to take them on notice, but let's see how we go. Thank you.
I've only seen the financial statements tonight, and please correct me if I'm wrong in my interpretations. If you go to page 4, you'll see loss on disposal of assets, note 10.A. If you then go to 10.A in the notes, that relates to investment properties. How can anybody have an investment property worth $510,000 and you sell it for $0? Was that sale to a related party? Was it advertised as a proper auction process? How can a property be sold for $0? That's my first question. Turned off? Yep.
Through you, presiding member, I think that was related to a adjustment required for when we were disposed of properties on Hay Street, and we hadn't captured one of the buildings that was related to that property when we demolished it. We'd actually demolished it and missed it off, and we had to adjust it to reflect that it was had no value because the building had been demolished.
Land, the building's demolished, but the land remains. So
the land that the building was on was sold in a prior year.
Question is fairly basic, but the rates on my little property at 57 Forest Street are over $5,000. Sure, there's staff in the building, they don't visit libraries, they just go to work. So I'm quite concerned when you look at page 4 of the financial statements, if I read it correctly, the rates are 24 million, and yet somehow the council spends 13 million on what they call recreation and culture. Now, if I'm right in that assumption, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I do not approve of excessive rates where money is spent on recreation and culture to the extent of more than 50% of the rates. Leading on to that, I'll just raise the third question, and I don't think the heading's properly stated, but you'll see on page 4 that transport is 10.6 million. Again, the rates are 24 million. The streets in Subiaco are pretty much already established. High-rise gets built, but the roads don't change. So I'm at a loss to understand how the council can possibly spend 10 million, and what does transport mean?
Through you, presiding member. Those classifications that you're referring to are contained within the regulations for the local government, and it's classification, so general purpose funding, governance, and goes through rec and culture and transport. I'm going to give you a different reference because I know they're detailed in the city's annual budget. There is, in the introduction to the budget, I think it's the last 2 pages of that introduction, goes through and explains what's captured under that classification system for rec and culture and transport. But that includes, for example, in rec and culture, the operation of Lord's Recreation Centre, maintaining all the parks reserves within the city. So it's kind of broad in its capture, as well as the business units that support those functions and services to our community. Within transport, I believe the transport one also picks up not just your road and transport infrastructure, it'll pick up parking infrastructure and so forth, but as I said, I think the best and clearest reference that is easily accessible because it's on our website is in the introduction to the 21-22 budget. The last 2 pages actually does the classification and breakdown to explain what is captured under those classification headings.
Reply. I'm an accountant in my former life, but it seems to me that there should be a note. Transport should have a note, and there should be a reference in the appendix as to the breakup of what it is, because you say it's parking, but we've still got $10 million, so I'm at a loss how it can possibly cost 10 million. When you talk about 13 million being reserves and parks and Lords, again, there should be a note to the accounts, there should be a reference, and you go to the appendix. And I think everybody here would be interested to know how much Lords is costing, because we've got a cost of 13 million. It's more than 50% of our rates which are going on recreation and culture, and yet there's no breakup in the financial statement. So as a treasurer, past treasurer, I would expect these sorts of things to be shown. So perhaps for next year, maybe it can be considered.
That's been taken on board. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Would anybody else like to raise a question or motion? Thank you, Peter McDonald.
Thank you, presiding member. The CEO may have answered this question already. Is the Deputy Mayor the acting Mayor during the Mayor's leave of absence?
The Deputy Mayor remains the Deputy Mayor but will act as the Mayor in the Mayor's absence.
Are there any more questions, motions or statements for this evening? Okay, thank you. I believe we are coming near the end of our meeting. I just need to find the last page. Thank you. This is the really tricky part. I have to close the meeting. Okay, so I now declare the meeting closed at 7:52 p.m. I'd like to thank you all for a really robust and passionate meeting tonight. There's a lot of interest that was shared. I believe it is the grassroots democracy of local government at its absolute best, and I do commend you. I also just want to say a word on behalf of the staff, because there was some unfortunate attack on staff tonight, and I've been a councillor for near 10 years. I would like to stand up for their professionalism and the hard work that I've always seen them in doing their best. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming this evening, and I wish you a good evening. For anyone who would perhaps like to stay on for a cup of tea, that is on offer in the next room. If you'd like to talk to some councillors, perhaps a few of them are brave enough to stay around for you. So thank you very much and good night.